Welcome to Close Listening. I'm Zach Morgenstern, joined as always by silent co-host Ludwig von B. I've been listening to the Bob Dylan studio albums in order, and so far I've been reviewing every one. And now I'm really starting to question that decision because I just got to a weird one. Self-Portrait. This is the consensus first bad album by Bob Dylan. Though I would say there are different reasons why people call it a bad album. In my case, I started listening to this and thought it was fine for a little bit, whereas when this album was played live on the radio upon its release, quickly started calling the station and saying, "What the heck is this shit?" And the music reviewer Grail Marcus opened his review of the album with that. So let me start off just by saying this is a double album. And in my limited experience, double albums are almost never a good thing. It always feels like while the singers might have slightly too much good material for one album, it's never two albums worth of good material. Like Blonde on Blonde by Bob Dylan is about as close as you get to a good double album. And even there, I thought there were like three or four throwaway songs on that record. It really should have been a 1.5 album. But unfortunately, I guess you can't do that. So let's talk about some of the tracks on here. This album opens with a very weird one called All the Tired Horses. It has big strings and it's just repeated one line. All the tired horses in the sun, how you gonna get your riding done? And most interestingly, the singer on this track is not Bob Dylan. It's a chorus of three women. And so there are different interpretations of what Bob Dylan was doing on this album. But the interpretation that says he was trolling us is certainly supported by this first track. But it has a cool sound and it might pass for a good song if you're not paying attention and realizing it's just the same lyric again and again. Track number 2 is a traditional blues song called Alberta Number 1. Now we have Dylan singing. It sounds nice in his voice, just not the most interesting song in the world. Track number 3 is I Forgot More Than I'll Ever Know. This is a cover of an old Davis Sisters song, and Bob Dylan brings back his Nashville Skyline voice. So if you haven't listened to Nashville Skyline, rather than going, I'm like this, the standard Bob Dylan voice, he goes, I'm like this. So he tries and makes his voice sound a bit more beautiful, I guess. It obviously sounds silly because it's an imitation voice. Track 4 is the first thing on the album that sounds like an actual Bob Dylan song, though like the majority of the tracks here, it's a cover. It's called Days of 49, and it's a long, epic song about the gold rush. And the hero in the song is called Tom Moore. Now, I was thinking back a couple albums back to when Bob Dylan sang about Tom Paine in As I Went Out One Morning. Bob Dylan likes to refer back to historic figures who he literally or in a kind of abstract way quite admires. Who knows whether the name Tom Moore was intentional here, but the philosopher Thomas More, in his book Utopia, he apparently wrote about the idea that in a utopian society, gold would not be seen as this uniquely valuable metal. No, it would just be used for practical purposes like any other metal. So this song felt like a good fit for Bob Dylan, putting Thomas More in the context of the Gold Rush. Track number 5 is Early Morning Rain. It's a great Gordon Lightfoot song. I believe it was Gordon Lightfoot's breakthrough song. And Bob Dylan's voice sounds nice on this one. It's hard to top the Gordon Lightfoot original, even though this Tex-Mex version of the song is pleasant to listen to. With track 6, we get In Search of Little Sadie. If you know your Johnny Cash, chances are you've basically heard this song before. It's the old folk song that became Johnny Cash's Cocaine Blues, and it's pretty much the same lyrics here, just a bit of a different rhythm. And the one thing Bob Dylan does differently than Johnny Cash is he ends the song by repeating the first verse. So the Johnny Cash is sort of a fable, don't do dangerous drugs or you'll end up killing someone and end up in jail for the rest of your life. Whereas Bob Dylan, by repeating the first verse, makes the whole thing seem more like a fever dream and less like a straight up morality piece. Track number 7 is called Let It Be Me, which was apparently originally a French song by Gilbert Bécaud and was later done in English by the Everly Brothers. And like lots of the things on here, it sounds nice. It's not that interesting. Track 8 is where we start to wonder again, is Bob Dylan trolling us? This one is called Little Sadie. You may remember track 6 is called In Search of Little Sadie, and it's the exact same song, just a slightly different rhythm. Track 9 is an instrumental called Woogie Boogie. Track 10, Belle Eel. Again, folk song. It sounds like a reasonably good fit for Bob Dylan. He's introducing some strings in the background, which is nice. Lots of the singer-songwriters of the 60s and 70s used lush orchestral backing at some point or another, but Bob Dylan really never did that. So it's nice that he's experimenting with it here. Again, it's just on its own not the most interesting song, and certainly not going to seem interesting when you compare it to the standards of Bob Dylan. Track 11 is a honky tonk blues song called Living the Blues. And then track 12, again, starting to get some filler material. We have a live version of Like a Rolling Stone, but he's singing it in his Nashville Skyline voice. So certainly not as good as the original, but it's fine. It's nice to hear the different version. This more country style of Like a Rolling Stone weirdly ends up kind of sounding like Steve Miller Band's The Joker. Track 13 is one of the critically acclaimed songs on this record. It's called Copper Kettle. The one thing that's kind of weird about it is the sort of vintage backup singers who are interesting sounding, but maybe don't fit the rest of the feel of the song. But it's just a very soulful vocal delivery by Bob Dylan on this one, which is just a song about making moonshine, a legal whiskey in the American South. The soulful performance reminds me of Tom Petty's later song, Southern Accents. And perhaps Bob Dylan was really inspired with this one because his old friend Joan Baez had helped popularize the song back in the day. It's funny, one thing I've been saying with this songs here and even on Nashville Skyline is that Bob Dylan found a way to make his voice sound better, but the music at the same time was less interesting. Copper Kettle is the first time on this record where I'm really thinking about the idea that Bob Dylan was a bad singer. You really hear the cracks on his voice, but it's just a great emotional performance of a song. Gotta Travel On comes next, a percussive hippie country kind of tune. Then we get a version of the old Rodgers and Hart song Blue Moon. Then we get Simon and Garfunkel's The Boxer. Again, I will take the Simon Garfunkel version, but I do like that Bob Dylan has fun where he sings a duet with himself on this one, as if one of his voices is Simon and one of his voices is Garfunkel. Track 17 is the one song on this album that kind of counts as a hit. It was called The Mighty Quinn. I don't necessarily think it was a success for Bob Dylan, but it piqued the interest of various performers, including the Hollies, the Grateful Dead, and Fish, who would all go on to have their successes with it. It's a jubilant Dylan sounding song about some kind of folk hero, and it sounds like it's the kind of thing where maybe the person isn't actually that special a hero, but the crowd is all getting very excited about them. I don't know, like they're the guy who brings the beers to the party. Possible influences for it were the actor Anthony Quinn, who I believe was a Mexican actor who played an Inuit character in a movie, or the film producer Gordon Quinn. Obviously, this song might have a bit of trouble getting traction now because it's called Quinn the Eskimo, the Mighty Quinn, and some people might not like that, term for Inuit people anymore, but other than that word, there's nothing problematic within the song. It's just a fine, catchy Dylan tune. Track number 18 is called Take Me As I Am or Let Me Go. So Bob Dylan clearly likes the Everly Brothers. I don't know if they recorded this one, but it was by Lou Bryant, who was one of their principal songwriters, and Dylan performs it in his Nashville Skyline voice. Track number 9 is called Take a Message to Mary. This is in the sort of send a message to my dying lover genre, similar to songs like Send My Love to Rose or Streets of Laredo. And this one was again written by Bud Lou and Felice Bryan and recorded by the Everly Brothers. And it reintroduces those backup singers from the opening Horse song. Track number 20 is called It Hurts Me Too. Classic blues song with just some acoustic guitar. Track 21 is called Minstrel Boy. This one is in the minority as a Bob Dylan composition on this record. It sounds like a very vintage folk song with some interesting harmonies on it. Track number 22 is another live version. This is She Belongs to Me, a song from the Bringing It All Back Home album. Not a song that stood out to me before, but the audience claps at the beginning of the live version. So clearly it had its fans. Track number 23 is called Wigwam. It's a sort of mariachi sounding funeral march. And the one thing that's kind of bold about it is that it's basically just Bob Dylan singing la la la, but he's singing it very seriously and sings it through the whole song. I think this one had its life extended a bit because it was used in the Royal Tenenbaums soundtrack. I don't know. It's a nice piece, but I don't know if it would really be memorable other than that. And then he just concludes the album with another rendition of that old song, Alberta. So it's hard to know what's going on with this one, why it feels like such a disappointment. And again, it depends on your reason why you find it a disappointment. In my case, I was okay with this album, and then I just started to get bored several tracks in. And it's just because the amount of good but not great songs piles up on each other. and also just generally double albums kind of become too much. Was Bob Dylan trolling people? Was he having fun being sarcastic, as he clearly was on Blonde? Was he making another attempt to escape fame? You know, something he'd been doing throughout his career. Back when he recorded Another Side of Bob Dylan, he was trying to escape his reputation as the political voice of a generation. But even when he largely left politics behind, he still remained this sort of countercultural icon. And even that was too much for him. So he has to flee behind this absolutely absurdist album in order to finally lose his place as like America's leading musical celebrity. But the other theory could just be that, Bob Dylan really liked old time folk and country music. And, he thought if he got together and did nice recordings with real musicians, people would like it. And because he likes all the songs on this collection, it doesn't feel like, 24 tracks is way too much for him, even though it would be for a lot of listeners. There's a lot of mystery in this album, and even in the album cover. You look at it superficially, you think this is a lazily put together self portrait, but there's also actually a lot of texture in here. You see the shadowing in the nose, the fact that one eye is looking down and the other is looking straight ahead, texture in the flesh color. I don't know. This is not the kind of bad painting someone who did not have painting skills would just come up with. And certainly later in life, Bob Dylan developed as a painter. So there's a lot of mystery here. To what degree is this an intentionally off-putting album? To what degree, was this Bob Dylan's escape plan? And to what degree did Bob Dylan grossly underestimate how alienating this album would be for people because maybe he liked a lot of this stuff? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I'm Zach Morgenstern for Ludwig von B. See you next time.